And because of that, I think that therapy, structurally speaking, is part of the problem and not part of the solution. Even though most of the people operating as individuals inside that space are definitely not part of the problem because of their motivations and what they're doing, but they are part of a system that keeps everything intact and unchallenged. And that is a big problem that needs to change. The other part of it is that, okay, if society doesn't change overnight, so what is a person then to do if not therapy? And by the way, there is reasons even for a neurodivergent person to seek therapy, right? They might still, in addition to being neurodivergent, have trauma, have experiences that are unresolved and carry what I talked about, the shame and the guilt and so on. And then to work with a neurodiversity informed therapist can help deal with that shame and so on. And that is in itself beneficial, but it doesn't solve the real big issue that they face. So what then can they do for themselves? I think the most effective thing is to realize that life is a creative act and not so much a demand and a problem to be solved that we need to solve towards feeling happy. When you are engaged in a creative process, you're not trying to feel happy in that moment. When you're raising your child and trying to do the right thing, or when you're giving birth, which is a very creative process, or when you're playing the piano, when Keith Jarrett is in Cologne and Köln and playing the grand piano, he's not trying to feel happy in that moment. It's a creative act. And our whole lives are actually that. It's a creative act and an invitation to blossom as the unique flower, the unique individual that we are. It's the one opportunity that every one of us has in their lives to really display this unique combination, this unique style of nervous system and perception and so on. That it can also be, shine for a brief second until the darkness of eternity swallows it. And so I think this opportunity needs to be taken. Nietzsche called this accepting your faith. I don't know if I translate correctly. I read Nietzsche, obviously, in German, as is my mother language, but my native tongue. But he refers to it as accepting one's faith and refers to it also as if a person has their why, they can deal with almost any how. So if a person accepts this challenge, this opportunity as their main goal, to become an individual, to display this individuality and live it in a way that what we do and what we are is an expression of who we are, then this is first of all health, because this means we are whole, we are one. And second, it becomes a creative act because there are so many obstacles and so much influence trying to force us into thinking about things in a way that it benefits others, or pretending to be a certain way, trying to force us into a certain way of experiencing, of feeling, of thinking, and so on. So it needs some degree of rebellion, and it needs a creative way of thinking to find new and fresh and improvised ways of how to exist as an individual in the world that forces us into giving up this individuality. So I think the seeking of happiness, the seeking of some sort of being symptom-free is completely unhelpful. It can be, by the way, and frequently is, a side effect even, oddly enough and paradoxically, but not because it is pursued, but because when we pursue the creative expression of who we are engaged in something that feels meaningful and that feels transcending And this usually, and it allows other people to connect to us and us to connect to others, because individuality and being authentic is very much a bonding, connecting experience. Because the self-acceptance we then have, the acceptance of who we are, is radiating then, and so we are also accepting with others, and it feels very, very comforting, very loving, and very nice to be with someone who is accepting of us and of themselves. There is not this sort of difficult tension and this demand and this expectations to behave in a certain way and so on. So we feel free. At least it attracts the right people, let's say, and it pushes away the wrong people. And so it leads to a fulfilled life also, but mainly because the process itself is so rewarding, and it is so much a process that can give a deeper kind of fulfillment. And I think engaging in that, having this mindset basically, is much more adequate for a person discovering that they are neurodivergent than fully committing to sort of a therapeutic path and you know, all the influences around who are just, you know, projecting their own nervous system as though it represents a whole group of people, or the whole ADHD world or autism world, whatever. I think none of that is basically healthy or helpful for the person. It doesn't lead to a person who is whole, who is one and integrated. So we have to go through a process of creatively living our life and of unlearning, of deconstructing all of the socially conditioned ways of thinking. And in addition to that, therapy can be helpful as so far as we have actual things that need processing, trauma, accumulated shame and guilt. If we had a very, very difficult childhood that we never really looked at, you know, it could be something worth pursuing, but that doesn't yield the highest outcome. It's just something that is supportive and can help. So I hope this gives a bit of an idea as to the relationship of therapy and neurodiversity.